3 prisoners escaped from the most secure prison in America, and they were never seen again. This wasn't just any prison. This was Alcatraz. Surrounded by freezing water, strong currents, and no way out. Officials said it was impossible. They said no one could survive the escape. But then one morning, 3 cells were empty. And in their place were fake heads, still lying in the beds. So what really happened? Did they drown, or did they actually escape? To understand how, you have to start before the escape, because Alcatraz was not just a prison, it was a statement, a warning, a place built to say one thing very clearly: if you end up here, the system has already won. That was the idea. The prison sat in the middle of San Francisco Bay like a locked jaw, cold water below, steel above, guards everywhere, and a reputation even bigger than the walls. People did not think of Alcatraz as a place where men lived. They thought of it as a place where men disappeared. That was the myth. And myths are dangerous because they make people careless. If something looks impossible, no one bothers to study how it might fail. That was the first contradiction. Alcatraz looked invincible, but invincible things always have weak points. The men who ended up at Alcatraz were not ordinary prisoners. They were the ones the system did not know how to handle anywhere else. Men who escaped before. Men who caused trouble before. Men who had already proven they were hard to control. So the government did what governments do when they are afraid of failure. It built something bigger, stronger, colder. A prison that was supposed to outmatch human instinct. Inside those cells were men who had one thing in common: they did not all look like masterminds. That matters, because the most dangerous people are often the ones nobody notices. Frank Morris was one of them. Quiet, patient, careful. The kind of man who did not waste words or movement. John and Clarence Anglin were different. Brothers, close enough to trust each other, steady enough to keep working when other men would give up. And there was Alan West too. He was part of the plan. Almost. That word matters because this escape was not neat. It was not a clean movie heist where every step works exactly as planned. It was messy, human, and that is what made it dangerous. Because the prison expected loud rebellion, it did not expect patience. It did not expect men who would work in silence for months without making a scene. That was the contradiction. The prison was built to stop force, but the escape would not be force, it would be patience. The escape did not begin with a dramatic break. It began with tiny decisions, small enough to ignore, small enough to dismiss. A little scraping here, a little lifting there, a little more progress every day. That is how real plans work. They do not announce themselves. They hide inside routine. And prisons, especially strict prisons, are full of routine. That routine became the escapees' cover. Behind their cell walls were ventilation openings. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just weak points. And weak points can be widened, not all at once, not loudly, just enough, then a little more, then again. The prison thought it had control because the men were still in their cells. That was the lie. The real work was happening where nobody was looking. That is how systems fail. Not through one giant hole, through 1,000 tiny ones that no one thought mattered. The men used homemade tools made from what they could find. Tools built from time, pressure, and persistence. The prison looked stable. Inside it, something was changing. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. Every escape needs a second problem. It is not enough to get out of the cell. You have to make the prison believe you are still inside it. That was the real challenge, because once the guards knew the men were missing, the whole prison would come alive. So the escapees needed a lie, and they made one. Fake heads. It sounds almost ridiculous when you say it out loud, but that is exactly why it worked. They made heads from soap, paper, paint, and real hair collected from the prison barbershop. They placed them on their pillows from the right angle, at the right distance. In the right light, they looked like sleeping men. That is the second contradiction. The prison that was supposed to see everything was fooled by something tiny, homemade, and human, not by weapons. By the simple fact that people often see what they expect to see. The guards expected sleeping inmates, so they saw sleeping inmates. That is how the trick worked. It was not magic. It was psychology. And it was working exactly because it looked too ordinary to matter. The men were not just escaping the prison. They were escaping the prison's assumptions. The night of the escape was quiet. That matters, not because quiet means safe. Quiet often means the opposite. Quiet means the danger has already started and nobody has noticed yet. The men moved through the hidden spaces behind the cells, through maintenance corridors, through places no prisoner was supposed to be able to use. That is another contradiction. The prison was built on the belief that every path was controlled, but the path to freedom was hiding inside the parts the prison had forgotten to defend. By the time they reached the roof, they were already halfway out. And the roof was not just the roof, it was the last boundary. Below it was the bay, and the bay was waiting like a second prison. Freezing water, strong currents, black darkness. If the walls did not kill them, the water probably would. That was the belief everyone held. That was why no one expected the escape to succeed, but belief is not the same as fact. The men had prepared something else. A raft. Not a perfect raft, built from raincoats and sealed with care. A raft made in secret by men who had decided that impossible was just another word for not yet. The most dangerous thing about the escape was not the plan. It was how little it looked like one. There was no explosion, no alarm screaming through the prison, no grand action scene, just movement. Just timing, just 3 men slipping through the cracks of a system that believed itself stronger than them. That is the part people still struggle to believe, because the human mind expects great escapes to look great. It expects noise, drums, chaos, but Alcatraz was beaten in silence. The fake heads stayed in the beds, the prison stayed calm, the guards kept walking, and the men kept moving. When the alarm finally came, it came too late. Because the escape had already stopped being a possibility. It had become a fact. They crossed the roof, they reached the edge, they got to the water, and then they were gone. That is the third contradiction. The prison was watching them, and still did not see them leave. Morning is supposed to reveal things. At Alcatraz, morning exposed a lie. The guards found the beds, the fake heads, the empty cells, and suddenly the prison that had seemed so solid looked very human, very breakable, very embarrassed, because nothing humbles power faster than being fooled by something homemade. The search began immediately. Boats, planes, guards, federal agents, the entire machinery of the prison system turned toward the bay. But there was a problem. The men had already bought time, and time is the one thing a search can never recover. By the time the prison realized what happened, the escape was not happening anymore. It had happened. That difference matters. Because a failed plan is one thing. A plan that works long enough to disappear into history is another. And that is exactly what happened here. The prison that claimed no one could escape had lost 3 men in a single night. That should have been the end of the story. It wasn't. The official version says the men likely drowned, and that is possible. The bay was brutal. The currents were strong, the water was cold enough to punish anyone who underestimated it. Escaping Alcatraz was never going to be easy, even if everything went right, but that is why the mystery survives. Because no bodies were found, no final proof settled the matter forever. No clean ending came down like a judge and closed the case. So the question remained alive. Did they make it? Did they drown? Did they reach shore and disappear into the world? Or did the bay take them before freedom could? That uncertainty is what keeps this story alive, not just the escape. The unanswered ending, because humans can live with almost any story except the ones that do not finish. So here is the part nobody can settle. Was this a desperate gamble that ended in the bay? Or was it one of the greatest escapes ever pulled off in America? The prison says one thing, the mystery says another. And the truth, somewhere out there, still has not come back to tell us. 3 prisoners escaped from the most secure prison in America, and they were never seen again. That sounds impossible. And maybe that is exactly why people still watch this story, because it reminds us of something uncomfortable. No prison is perfect. No system is untouchable, and no wall is strong enough if someone has enough patience to work at the cracks long enough. Alcatraz was supposed to be the end. Instead, it became the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries in American history.